All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Inspired a Galaxy. Today, Cassie and I are going to be talking about the world of Pandora. As we both have had a chance to go see Avatar 2 now, and wanted a chance to talk about it. Taking a little break from the Star Wars action to dig into another franchise that we both feel deserves some of our attention, some of everyone's attention, probably. But how are you doing, Cassia?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well. Today I'm drinking water in honor of the Way of Water.
Excellent, excellent. That is always a good choice. Make sure you stay hydrated out there. That's a good New Year's resolution as we're just turning over the page into 2023 here. So, like I mentioned, today we're going to be talking a little bit about Avatar, and then the sequel, Avatar: The Way of Water, which just came out a couple of weeks ago on December 16th of 2022. It's already up into the top 10 of worldwide box office results for all time. So, kudos to Mr. Cameron on that distinction, having hold down the first spot with the original Avatar, which came out back in 2009. So, Cassie, I guess to get into Avatar a little bit, let's go back to that time, 2009. Avatar, was that something that you went and saw? Were you excited about it? Did you like the story, or did you not watch it at all? What was your kind of introduction to James Cameron's world of Avatar?
I was curious about it because everyone was talking about Avatar in like the lead up to 2009 and it just seemed to have some really good trailers, and it came from James Cameron, who released a lot of cool movies, a lot of which I hadn't seen then, but I had seen Titanic.
Yeah.
So I was curious. I ended up seeing it in theaters, and um, the effects were great. I saw it in 3D, but I was like, this story is kind of weak, but I know that everyone was really excited to get Avatar on DVD, and I think Blu-ray existed then. And like when you walked into a Best Buy, like when it was released, just like every screen was Avatar for a while.
Yeah.
So that's what I remember. What about you?
Yeah, so like I said, Avatar it came out in 2009, and I've been a pretty big fan of James Cameron. He directed Titanic, just a few years, prior, well, a few years, about a decade prior to that, and kind of got all of the awards and the accolades, and that had made all of the money, but had also directed one of my favorite films, Terminator 2, The Abyss, Aliens, stuff like that. So I was kind of interested in it just from that standpoint because I really liked James Cameron's kind of methods of storytelling and his visual storytelling and kind of these worlds and situations that he created. So I was interested from that standpoint, and then also you had kind of this new technology and the way that it wasn't new at all. 3D films and TV and images had been around for a long time, but to use them kind of in this fashion was really kind of unique and really kind of created a stir. I remember, yeah, you'd go into Best Buy and every TV then was 3D, and every movie was coming out in 3D, whether it needed to be or not to kind of carry on that. But yeah, I was very excited for it. Everyone in the world saw it. It made close to $3 billion. I actually was in London visiting some friends and went and saw it there. Kind of its first week that it was out over there. So yeah, it was a story that I liked and a world that I liked by a director that I liked, and you had kind of the people that would naysay it and say, it was kind of the simple story, or it, wrote off the back of other stories and things. And I never really, took too much to heart with that. And we're going to talk a little bit about Avatar and Star Wars here kind of at the end. So I'll save my thoughts kind of on the similarities there and those releases for that. But, in terms of my kind of first experience getting into Avatar, it was that. And then, 13 years on, it wasn't really something I thought about. James Cameron had talked about, how he was going to be doing this whole, trilogy or quadrilogy or five movie or,
It keeps growing.
all this stuff. It keeps growing. It kept growing, and it was always something he was going to do. And he basically stepped away from directing to work on this. But I think that myself, and I think at least a lot of people probably just kind of didn't forget about the world of Pandora completely, but you just didn't think about it, right? 13 years is a long time to go from one to the next. So now that this new one was coming out, it kind of rekindled my interest, and as we got closer and closer to the release, I just got more and more kind of excited about going to see it and seeing how it looked, and that's kind of how I came into seeing the second Avatar. But what about you, Cassia? How did you go from 2009, that first film, to 2022, 23, seeing the second version of Pandora now?
I think I kind of became like, I kind of rode the mainstream wave of being like, Avatar's overrated, like it has a weak story, it doesn't have any lasting legacy. But once I saw like the previews for The Way of Water, I was like, this looks really amazing visually. I'm at least gonna want to see it on IMAX 3D. And then I ended up seeing it, and like I kind of thought it was the first of something new. I remember in episode, I think it was 120, we were kind of talking about like how stories will evolve with Chris Vogler, and we were kind of talking about like how everything is a mini series nowadays, and it's kind of long, and like movies are getting longer. And I was like, The Way of Water, like, kind of seems to be something different. Like, the Avatar saga, I think, will kind of focus on the Sully family. And, like, it's going to be longer form storytelling, which I think a lot of movie series and studios are kind of avoiding right now. And if they are connected, it's usually like them trying to be the MCU, or they are the MCU, so they're kind of connected through cameos or kind of a brand. But I just found it interesting, and like, even though none of them are humans, a very human story. So The Way of Water kind of became a little bit of a hyperfixation, and then I just thought there were pros and cons, like, to that movie and like the whole Avatar series, and I thought it would be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. It is kind of a more isolated family type of a story, right? And so we get into the story of Avatar: The Way of Water, and it kind of picks up in real time, right? It's been 13 years in Pandora too. So you have, Jake Sully has his family now. It's been 13 years and has some kids. So it's really kind of an exploration of, the ripple effects, I guess, of the first Avatar. And this movie just kind of jumps into, what that means for Jake Sully and his family as they have to, flee out of the kind of more jungle regions of Pandora and out to the, aquatic regions of Pandora to kind of hide and, to get some safety for their old clan and meet up with a new clan. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting in the fact that, James Cameron basically used the first film as this kind of world building medium here for the second. It didn't really get into that. If you go back and you rewatch the first Avatar, they he spends a lot of time saying this is what Pandora is, and these are who the Na'vi are, and this is how avatars work, and this is how we can breathe and do all these things right in this world. So you don't have to spend any time doing that in the second film. Which is really that impressive that the second film goes on to be, just shy of 3 hours and 20 minutes long, without having to do any of that explanation. It, just, fills up that whole time with just this visual magic trick that James Cameron's able to pull off. As it's telling, a pretty small story, but the scope of that story is really big and grand.
Yeah. And I had lots of thoughts about it. You had lots of thoughts. And what I ended up asking some patrons and friends was, I'm I'm recording a podcast on what Star Wars can learn from James Cameron's Avatar. I was wondering, what do you like or dislike about James Cameron's Avatar series? What do you think Star Wars could learn from the Avatar series, or should it be the other way around? And then I ended up getting some responses, and we can kind of go over them, because I think we got, like, some people who really like Avatar, some that are kind of mid, and then some that kind of have some criticisms.
Right.
And then we'll give our thoughts, and because, like, I think, like, this won't be, like, just a straight up what Star Wars can learn from Avatar, but, like, maybe, like, more of, like, Star Wars and Avatar comparison, or maybe we can even be cute and say, like, Star Wars and Avatar, I see you, you know?
I see you. Yeah, there you go. I like that. I like that. Yeah, we can use the Navi saying there. Yeah, so let's we'll kind of run through these here. So, Lord from our Patreon, which if you want to get on our Patreon, we got a lot of fun stuff going over on there. It's patreon.com/Old Republic Podcast. But Lord says that the pros for Avatar were that Cameron had planned the sequels to make a continuous story that is congruent. The visuals and the thematic storytelling was good. The cons were felt his characters were weak. It was hard to tell the difference between Jake Sully's children in the movie, and the general characters were one-dimensional. The villain was just wasting millions of dollars on revenge. Yeah, that's true. And then it goes on to kind of compare what Star Wars could learn from Avatar is to plan the series into more connective series and let the creator's vision prevail. And what about the other way around there? What Avatar could learn for Star Wars is to make more compelling characters and to tell a story in under 3 hours. So there you go. That is Lord. Thank you for your contribution there. What do you got, Cassia?
There's something that in me that just agrees that, like, anything over 90 minutes is, like, a failure, but then also, like, I ended up enjoying, like, Avatar and Avatar The Way of Water, even though they're kind of longer movies, and Titanic is, like, 3 hours plus, you know, sometimes you need more time to tell a story, so, I do think, like, having, kind of, like, a really, like, an outline, because I think they thought about, like, there's been a gap between Avatar and what would have been the sequel. Like, they really wanted to make sure they got the story right, and, I think the story was much stronger. Story and characters were much stronger in The Way of Water. And, like, from what I hear about the plans for the series, it sounds like they really thought about, like, what steps to take. Like, it sounds like they were trying to make movies 2 and 3 into one movie. And once they kind of stepped back, because it wasn't working, and realized those needed to be Avatar 2 and 3, it ended up working better. And if you kind of listen to, like, some of, like, the interviews that James Cameron is giving, like, he, like, in Avatar 3 is, like, going to focus on the Ash people and, like, some of the negative, like, traits of the Na'vi, in the next one, and, like, in the 5th one, like, they're gonna go to Earth, you know, and you're gonna see that the planet's dying, and you're gonna kind of see it through Natiri's eyes. Like, she just kind of just sees the RDA and, like, colonizers on her world, but I think she kind of sees, like, these people are dying and they're not all evil, you know, so.
Right. Yeah. I think there is, kind of something to be said for, kind of the connectivity of it. And I think that works in its favor if you're telling one kind of singular story. But I mean, we even have kind of examples of that within Star Wars, right? So you have the original trilogy, obviously, Star Wars: A New Hope, written and directed by George Lucas. But then you had other writers and other directors coming on board to do, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And then converse to that, you have something like the prequel trilogy that were all written and directed by George Lucas. So you kind of get the difference in the way that both of those feel just within the Star Wars world. Now, I think that planning something out and having a long connectivity is something that you can really only do if you're really going to pin down one or two directors or one or two writers to write the whole thing, because it's hard to do that with different directors, because everyone has kind of their own creative visions and how they would handle things, and the way they see things, and things like that. So I think that it's kind of a double-edged sword, whether you're going to be able to do that and have this long linear connectivity as you tell a story. But I think that, yeah, definitely could plan ahead probably a little bit better. Really just kind of in terms of anything. And we even see something that was as planned out and tightly knit as the Marvel series up through the Avengers, and then eventually even something, the juggernaut of that can kind of run out of steam to that sense. So yeah, I think there's definitely some room for some more planning, but we see kind of instances where that really succeeds, and and people really try to do it, and it still comes up a little bit short too.
Yeah. And then I ended up asking Al, who is the host of the podcast, The Movies That Move Us. I actually was on it to talk about the movie Alpha, which everyone should see, and I love it. But
Absolutely.
what Al says is, oh dang, that's a good topic. They both have much to learn about each other. And he says Star Wars should have more time just to vibe in their universes and beautifully explore them. And they should also go more granular with their ecosystems. And if you're like me, I had to Google what granular meant. And in case you're wondering, granular on dictionary.com, or actually merriam-webster.com, it consists or appearing to consist of granules, grainy, finely detailed. So, like in Star Wars, how kind of like all of the planet is one biome, and basically if the Empire takes over one city, they've taken over the planet. I kind of think Star Wars, that's kind of the allure of Star Wars in a way, is galaxy hopping, getting blasters out, lightsabers out. But do you think there's room for kind of just beautifully exploring one ecosystem and kind of seeing more diversity in it?
I think that there certainly is possibilities for that. As we'll see as the universe of Star Wars kind of keeps expanding, it seems like even within the new worlds of Star Wars, the High Republic, the Mandalorian, and things like that, we're still going to planets that we've never talked about in Star Wars before. But that was kind of in George's, I guess, kind of vision of Star Wars, is that there was a desert planet and a snow planet and a forest planet and a city planet, right? So that was kind of how Star Wars was structured to begin with. So I don't know if we'll see that kind of carry on, if we'll see a little bit more exploration of each of these different kind of biomes from planet to planet. But I think there certainly is some room for that, to do a little bit more exploration and a little bit more I don't know, kind of archaeology of systems as we go through Star Wars. And I think that that's probably something that we'll see as these stories kind of keep continuing, because eventually someone's going to want to tell a Star Wars story that's a little bit more isolated, but still, needs some feelings of difference in the way that the planet looks and feels, I guess.
Yeah.
So here's the response that we got on Discord. So let's see. My basic take on the Avatar series so far is that while the visuals are indeed incredible, fact, the plot in both movies is bland and cliche. James Cameron may be an innovator, but he could do better in the actual story department. Here's what Avatar can learn from Star Wars, but I worry they aren't going to listen. don't oversaturate the market. Avatar 1 was good because it was different and innovative. Avatar 2 has benefited because of the 15-year nostalgia wait. But if Star Wars has taught us anything, it's too much of a thing makes the spectacle less spectacular. So what do you think about that, Cassio? What do you think about kind of the long layoff? Is it warranted? Is it needed sometimes? What do you think?
I think the the long gap between Avatar in some ways kind of hurt it because no one was really talking about Avatar like for a few years there, but I think it also kind of helped because the market wasn't oversaturated with like uh TV shows about Avatar, or like with like five sequels to Avatar, like
Mm-hmm.
I love parts of the MCU, but sometimes it just feels like there's no room to breathe and they're just releasing like content that overlaps and kind of cannibalizes on it itself. And it was kind of nice just to have a new story 15 years later. And part of that gap was just so they're able to get the technology to do mocap in water and like make it easier for them to film doing mocap in 3D on the level that they want to do to
Mm-hmm.
improve the graphics and everything. So it kind of happened, and in some ways I think it kind of made it kind of like a stronger debut for that weight. But what do you think?
I think that the layoff, yeah, is both good and bad. One of the things, if you go to Twitter and type in Star Wars, you're gonna see a lot of people complaining that there hasn't been a Star Wars movie since Rise of Skywalker, and that's fair, I guess. That came out in 2019, so it's just been 3 years. I'm old enough to remember when Star Wars took a 16-year layoff between Return of the Jedi and Episode One coming out, and then a 12-year layoff between Episode Three and Episode Seven coming out. So certainly, I think that is kind of good, but also kind of bad. You don't want to wait that long. But yeah, I kind of do agree that if you have too much of it, it has the tendency to make it feel a little less like important to see when you have kind of a big banner movie coming out every 3, 4, or 5 years. Like that feels important. But you kind of hit the nail on the head there with Marvel. When that first started coming out onto Disney Plus, you had WandaVision and everyone was watching that and talking about it, and then you had the Falcon and the Winter Soldier and She-Hulk and all this stuff just started coming out, and eventually you get to a point you're like, it doesn't feel as important to watch all of this stuff because there's so much of it and you don't have enough time to dedicate to it. And I think you do kind of run the risk of that, especially as Disney Plus is really kind of jam packed full of just content all the time. So yeah, I think that there's definitely some merit to slowing things down a little bit, to just to allow people to kind of catch their breath and make everything feel more kind of important and impactful for the story. So
Yeah. And then let me. Oh, and that came from impeccably dressed Nikolai Tesla. Is it Nikolai or Nicola?
I don't know. Yeah, you tell us. Let us know which one is right there, impeccably dressed. But thank you for your feedback on there. Yeah, some good comments there.
Yeah. And then my friend Ian, who kind of told me about the Star Wars pattern, Star Wars trilogy pattern that I've kind of mentioned on and off on the podcast. He said that flat out Avatar should learn from Star Wars. Avatar doesn't understand archetypes. It doesn't understand the purpose of the heroic journey, that there needs to be a formidable destination that's enormously compelling to any outsider. It may try to establish a solid villainy pit up against goodness, but it's not a villainy that contradicts the deep down humanity that people forget. Essentially, Avatar is just a hateful letter to the human race, so there's not a strong enough connection to reality, at least for me. And then, before we dive into your thoughts, I responded, I saw it more as an anti-imperialist, colonialist message, but I can see your angle. And he said, well, I understand your interpretation as well. I think it's definitely more accurate than mine, but a lot of my problem with it, especially in the sequel, is that he completely rejects the human race. Heck, even Cameron has no interest in showing as truly redeemable sides of humans unless they are connected to the Na'vi. But, I mean, we are gonna, in Avatar 3, kind of see, like, some of the less peaceful Na'vi, and then later on in the series we'll go to Earth and empathize more with the humans. But what do you think?
Yeah, so I think that if you look at Avatar the first film, I think that kind of those archetypes are built as we're just kind of exploring kind of this first sort of settlement that's coming to the planet of Pandora. And I guess the second one you could, I suppose, make that argument if you look at two as a standalone film, which I guess we're kind of having to do because that's the only one that's out now. But I think that a lot of that is going to be resolved through kind of the remaining storytelling. It's almost like if you were to take just the first book or the first movie from Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, you kind of get that same thing, right? You don't really understand the full complexities of the villains and what's really kind of happening, there in that story too. So I think that stuff is going to kind of play itself out as we learn a little bit more. And there actually, I think, is an extended version of Avatar you can get on Blu-ray or whatever have you, that actually does show some stuff that was cut about going back to Earth. And I think that was probably cut because Cameron
want
wanted
to see
to
Pandora.
because people wanted to see Pandora. And I think that Cameron knew that eventually he would be going back to show it, and it might be more impactful later in the story. And I think that might be part of the reason why that got cut. But I think that we will kind of explore those things. So eventually, and this is putting a lot of faith into the storytelling of James Cameron. But I think that we'll probably get this fully fleshed out sort of story as we go through and finish off the Avatar series.
Yeah, and I didn't quite see it as like a hateful letter to humanity, but I just kind of more saw it as like I said, like the anti-colonialism, imperialism. I mean, Jake does end up becoming a Na'vi, but I think it's so he can begin his family with Neytiri, like, so they can be more connected. But if you have any differing thoughts, let us know in the comments down below.
For sure. So we got one more, or I have one more here from our Discord, and RNRD Joe Man says that Avatar could learn from Star Wars. Avatar needs to be driven more by complex characters making choices instead of cool tech demos of a beautiful world. I still had a blast watching the new one though. And then Marcus replied to that actually, and it says, I don't know about that. Yeah, sure, we have this new groundbreaking tech, but there are complicated characters like Jake's daughter in touch with the Awa, and sometimes simplicity is better than overcomplication. And I kind of agree with Marcus there. First of all, calling that 3-hour spectacle that I just saw on the IMAX 3D screen a tech demo, I think is a little oversimplifying what happens. But gotta take that with a grain of salt. But I think that they are simple stories, and I think that that's okay. Simple stories and these story structures and these story tropes have existed for thousands of years and have been retold in different ways, an incountable number of times. And I think that that's perfectly fine. I don't think you need to have things that are overly convoluted, especially in the world of science fiction, where oftentimes having a complicated story can really get in the way and really kind of hinder your enjoyment and hinder the storyteller's ability to tell a good story if you get too bogged down in these details. Now, would I say that the stories are, overly simplistic? No, I think that they kind of serve the story, and really, you know, cool tech demo, is what's on display. You don't want the story to get in the way of what you're trying to do visually within this world. So I think that kind of that was part of it, and I think that it's just kind of, Cameron's storytelling style. You could look at any of his films, really. Has the biggest blockbusters of all time, but the stories are not the most complicated and convoluted. They're all pretty straightforward. Terminator 2, The Abyss, Aliens. They're not these big complicated things, and that's why I think that they're so easy for people to grasp a hold of and enjoy in the way that they do.
Yeah, and I mean, simple and complicated is subjective interpretation sometimes, and like finding the right balance, because sometimes you don't want stories to be so obvious, but I just remember seeing Tenet and like I think I understood it, but could I explain it? Not really, so probably I don't understand it. Like, you want the mainstream to be able to get behind your story. So I think James Cameron balances it well, more so in the second one rather than the first one. Or at least the version we saw in theaters. Because I forget that there are deleted scenes and all that. But, yeah, that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I talked to my friend Amy. We're big into movies, and we always send each other reviews and nerd out about movies. And she said, cool, I'm probably unqualified to answer, but I dislike how long it took for him to make the series. Well, I think it's a technical marvel. I expected more from the story taking that long. I like the second one better. I like the family emphasis. I like that they have their own language. I like the inventiveness of Pandora. I didn't like that they came and put the water people in complete danger. The villains are pretty stereotypical. This may sound weird. I hope they learn little from each other. I hope they don't replicate each other, stay very distinctively their own thing. So what do you think about that?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair, definitely, and they're very different worlds. One of the, but I do think that they kind of, I don't want to say take a lot of inspiration from each other, but one of the things I was gonna kind of talk about is we got into our own kind of thoughts. Is Avatar seems like something that George Lucas would really like.
Yeah.
I could just imagine him loving these stories, but yeah, keep stuff separate, and I don't really like to, get into every how these things should try to piggyback off of each other. It's really just kind of a exploration of what does this do well and what do we wish it did better, and vice versa, things like that. I do agree with the fact that I didn't like that went to the water villages there and took that war to it. But that's kind of the story trope that we were going to, is that war is coming to your doorstep, whether you want it to or not. Which is something we've been exploring recently in Star Wars with Andor and in the Bad Batch, right? Is that the Empire is coming now, whether you're going to acknowledge it or not, until it's too late. And that's kind of the same story that we're given here in Avatar: A Way of Water. And yeah, Jake Sully and his family did put them in danger, but really they're in danger because the Sky People were coming and they're going to take over this planet anyways. So whether Jake Sully got there with his family or not, that war was still coming to their doorstep. I'm okay with that. yeah, obviously you don't want don't want the people to be fighting, but I think that was just kind of the storytelling trope that Cameron was going for, and that. But yeah, keep things separate. And I mean, I think one of my favorite aspects of Avatar is that it is kind of its own thing. It's self-contained. It doesn't have to have three post-credit scenes to get us wound up for the next slew of Marvel films that's coming out, and it's not trying to connect all of these other series and get some sort of Avatar canon going, so to speak. So that's kind of what I think about that stuff there. But what about you? Anything additional to add, or?
I did watch The Way of Water a second time, and I think that Kortrich kind of had a singular mission. He was going to find the Sully clan no matter what, but I think what tipped them off is when Curie ended up having a seizure. Norm and his crew came to check on her, and they tracked that to the water clans. So that's how they ended up figuring out, like, that the Sullys were with the water people, which is like a storytelling, kind of conceit, but, because, like, when I first watched it, I thought, like, they just tracked them, but it was because they were tracking Norm.
Right.
So, I mean, they kind of did endanger them. Like, maybe they could have gone to, like, does Pandora have a North Pole? I don't know. Maybe that will happen later on in the series, but it's hard when, like, Kortrich is, like, reborn as a Na'vi, and he has his singular mission to avenge his death, So, yeah.
Yep. Let's see. So we've got so our friend Marcus from Hollow Chronicles of a Jedi. If you've listened to the pod for very long, you're well familiar with Marcus, but he sent us over a wee bit of a novel. So we're going to kind of break this up into a couple of sections here. Cassia, let's go through this one. So what does Marcus say? He says, "What can Star Wars learn from Avatar? It's quite simple: world building, family and emotional dynamics, exploration, and good storytelling. Right now, I believe Star Wars is on its bumpy path to something massive, and it's going to take some time to get there. Mandalorian being the flagship of understanding the galaxy George Lucas created, and Andor being the shining beacon of what great writing looks and sounds like. What James Cameron has done is come in with an original vision that may borrow story elements from other classic tales of growth and spirituality, and made something that showcases the reason of why we go to the movies. He crafted a new, original world that is yet to even be completely explored, and the stories aren't overly reaching to be profound and complicated." So what do you think, Cassia? So world building, what do we have world building wise in Avatar? What do we have right now world building wise in Star Wars? And where do you think we can go?
I think, kind of looking back, the prequels had some of the best world building in Star Wars, and sometimes the details weren't always, like, explicitly in the script. I mean, if you look at Utapau in Revenge of the Sith, like, it's a planet full of sinkholes, and, like, some of the natives live, like, on the upper levels, some live on the lower levels, and they're kind of separated that way, and it kind of seems like they have their whole society built around it, and Coruscant, man, I thought there was some pretty good world building throughout the prequel trilogies with Coruscant, and while the sequel trilogies, like, had some really incredible looking worlds, like, I was kind of like, when I was watching Rise of Skywalker, I'm like, so this is this planet is called Exegol? Yeah, it's Exegol, and I'm like, why is it so blue? I can't see anything, and I'm like, is it a Sith world? Like, is that a chorus in the background I can see? Are they doing Gregorian Sith chants? And
Yeah.
I was kind of just like, I don't know. And does the writer know? Maybe, but
Yeah. That's fair, I guess, to an extent. I think that, right after the prequels or the original trilogy would have come out, you would have said the same place about, or the same thing about those places, but they have the benefit of, 20, 30 years of additional sources, books and comics and cartoons and all sorts of other things that explore those planets and those biomes to really kind of make them feel more fleshed out than they do in just the movies if you're just looking at it kind of on that stance. But yeah, I think world building is something that is kind of important. We make the joke a lot that it's time to head back to Tatooine again, for
Yeah.
the 100th time. But I think that the world building is getting a little bit bigger, and I think that it will help, like I said, as we get more kind of supplemental materials to go along and really feel like these places are more fleshed out. And we're seeing, if you're not reading the High Republic, there's a bunch of world building stuff that's going on within that too, and we'll see kind of what that leads to down the road in terms of live action stuff with the Acolyte or any potential movies or games or anything else that we might be getting from that stuff there in terms of the world building. Let's see here.
I can continue.
Yeah, so Cassie, why don't you carry on with Marcus's?
Star Wars is the OG when it comes to world building, but since George has left the franchise, the galaxy has become a bit smaller with every new entry. Sure, I love seeing characters I grew up with handled correctly. An example, Luke Skywalker in Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett, or characters that still have a life to live and a story to tell. An example, Ahsoka and the rest of the Phoenix Squadron. The most important thing is that there needs to be a planet that isn't captured or destroyed with one city. Hell, there are 3 cities on Tatooine alone. I would love to see a Star Wars story that is set on one planet and we get to see the different regions of it. Should I continue, or
Okay.
did you want to talk?
No, and yeah, that kind of echoes that other statement, right? Of just doing a little bit more of a deep dive exploration on a single place. So yeah, maybe that's something we'll get to see in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, I hope. And then secondly, I would love to see a family relationship or drama within the franchise again. Bad Batch or Rebels do and don't count. They're both crews that become a family, but I want something as dynamic and powerful as the Sully family that we saw in The Way of Water. Show me a family in the universe that has children learning to live in a new society governed by the Empire First Order, or even go back to the days of the Republic when the Separatists were rising. Maybe do a story that is disconnected with all of that and make it about a planet that is like what Tarkin said in A New Hope. The regional governors now have direct control over their territories. Show me more of that. Give me more of what Andor did. And then he goes on to say, I've rambled on long enough, I believe. In closing, the ability to stick to a new planet and explore its regions, learn the social, political, and maybe economic lifestyles, the different type of people in every region, and even the creatures native to that planet. And finally, the family aspect of Avatar could all be something Star Wars could learn to explore more in the future and branch out of just Jedi, Sith, and Mandalorians. Which is kind of funny because Star Wars didn't really begin as a family saga, but it became one. And then Star Wars kind of is more focusing on found family, I guess.
Yeah, really. I don't disagree with kind of those statements from just a straight storytelling perspective, but that does kind of erase a little bit of what Star Wars is. Star Wars is kind of more of this found family type of story, and that story revolves to tell us, tales of Jedi and Sith and kind of those people. So that's I think fundamentally what Star Wars is. And
Yeah.
so I mean, you could look at something like Andor, which is brilliant, and I absolutely loved it, but it was very different than what I think of when I think of a Star Wars tale, right? Because
Yeah.
it kind of lacked some of that stuff. Now, does that mean that there isn't room to explore kind of more family type of dynamics within Star Wars. I think that certainly that's a possibility, and maybe that's something that we'll have now going forward, right? You know, Luke has kind of laid that all to bear for Rey in the sequel trilogy, right? Is that the Jedi were basically kind of their own worst enemy, caused their own demise with their hubris and stuff, and maybe that is going to change the way that the Jedi can act and behave, and explore the galaxy going forward. Maybe it's not this thing where you're ripped from your parents at a young age and sent off to train, and
Yeah.
are never allowed to have any attachments. Maybe that changes now. Maybe that was kind of the ultimate sort of lesson that Luke taught Rey, and we'll see some of that stuff going more forward. And we do see some of that stuff. Bring it up again. The High Republic. You see a lot more sort of relationships and things like that. So really, it just kind of was in the prequel era of the Jedi there where it started to take kind of its ultimate downturn. But what do you think? Any other kind of thoughts on what Marcus had to say there, Cassia?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we would like to see some changes in, like, whether it be Avatar or Star Trek or Star Wars. But, like, sometimes if you kind of change them too much and try to, like, insert some of what you like about, like, Dune or Avatar or Game of Thrones into a certain series, it kind of just becomes, like, a little bit of an imitation rather than like its own series, its own original series. So I guess it's a balance, but I'm not saying like I'd want like found families to discontinue, because that is kind of what Star Wars is about, but it also was like a family saga. And maybe there could be a new family, like the Shan clan, or a new as of unwritten family,
Yeah.
in the future, and maybe kind of take some hints from Andor, kind of make it feel a little bit more developed in the planets and like how the Empire manages them, but it's always down to subjective opinion, like how well or not well franchises are handled, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and kind of at the heart of it, Star Wars is, or at least it always, had been, aimed at kids, right? It was, the kind of movie that, George Lucas wanted to tell, for kids when he wrote A New Hope, and that was kind of always what it was aimed at. So, so really, as you get older, think of what a young 8, 10, 12 year old version of yourself would have liked to see, and maybe that's kind of the ultimate take on that there. So, yeah. So, and then I asked on Instagram if anyone had some feedback, and I got a little bit of response here. So our friend of the pod, Babu Frick, says he might have liked the movie a little bit more if it was 20 or 30 minutes shorter. The end felt like a long slog. I don't know. Agree to disagree. It was maybe a little long. Maybe there were a couple of moments in kind of that final closing act that I said this should be winding down, but I didn't care. It was so much fun to watch. I was okay with it. And then let's see, Hooney says he's interested to hear our thoughts. So here you go, Hooney. Hope you've liked our thoughts so far. We're going to have some closing thoughts here shortly. But he says that he's kind of boycotting it after what James Cameron decided to say about the Lakota Nation. And it seems like we'd really enjoyed it from the Letterboxd reviews. So yeah, unfortunately, that has kind of that aspect of it as well, which I wasn't super familiar with. So I'm glad that Hooney brought that to my attention, so I can go back and do a little bit of research and learn and see what is going with that. So thanks, Hooney, for your feedback and the chance to do a little bit of educating and learning. So thank you. Always good to hear from Hooney.
Yeah, and I was gonna kind of like address that, but like in 2010, James Cameron, we won't repeat his words, but he kind of made I think some wrong and insensitive comments, and they are worth addressing. And I think there are criticisms to be had for the Avatar series. Like, I think it can, it kind of addresses, like, the Na'vi are kind of stand-ins for indigenous populations, and you kind of see the RDA and humans kind of reenact the takeover story. And sometimes when you're creating like blue people, you know, it can dehumanize actual indigenous populations around the world, and possibly like be triggering. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot, maybe if any, indigenous writers. There were more indigenous people in the cast, but probably not enough. In the sequel, The Way of Water, we had Cliff Curtis portraying Tonawari, and he kind of inspired the Sea Peoples. They kind of felt a little more authentic, kind of like New Zealanders, Maori. And I think Star Wars needs to have more indigenous collaborators and creatives behind the scenes too. So more franchises, really, because I think it is important. And Brian and I are two white people, but we're always trying to learn, you know.
Yep.
I do think the Avatar fan base represents themselves well, and it seems like they're very focused on the environment. And from what I could tell, whenever there's like Na'vi language meetups, they always try to also pick up trash as well, and they try to like when there's real world like evictions, you know, like happening around the world, like kind of like that mirrored the fictional Avatar story. They try to bring awareness to them and raise money, and not just have people, you know, enjoy a blue people story, but try to turn it into a message, a lifestyle, you know. So I do kind of have some issues with Avatar, and thank you for bringing that up. If there's anything you feel like we missed the ball on, please let us know, and we'll address it in the future. So, and Hooney's thoughts kind of, I kind of forgot I had some more thoughts from Al, but they kind of made me think about kind of some of the criticisms I have of Avatar. Because I was telling him, like, I saw it on IMAX 3D and then 3D. I think the saga will be cool to see unfold as long-form storytelling. Agreed, it's cool to see his passion and world building. He's clearly invested in making the world very diverse and beautiful with a real ecosystem. Even if I think his actual Na'vi culture is reductionist, noble, savage, and I said, it is, but I think the best way forward is to have more indigenous creators and writers involved. And then I went on to say, like, I guess it can get people curious about environmentalism and indigenous issues. It can be a starter point, but it can't be just an end point. I think you have to care about the real world and the people in it. And Yeah. Is there anything you think I should have brought up, or did you have any other comments kind of thinking about what Hooney said?
No, I think yeah, it's important to use kind of every opportunity that you get to kind of learn and do some research and things. And like you said, Cassia, hopefully in terms of stories like this, if you're talking about indigenous people within the world of Avatar, hopefully that leads you then to go and do some exploration of indigenous people in our in the real world, and learn more of their stories. And then hopefully, yeah, those stories are being told and are getting input and from the people who are meant to be represented by them. I think that's really important. And you know certainly Avatar is this kind of singular thing, but within the world of these bigger, more widespread franchises, and your Star Wars and your Marvel and your DC stories. Hopefully, that's the case where they're bringing a lot of varied voices into the room, and that's something that everything can do better. Quite frankly.
Yeah. And it's thanks for bringing that up. And like I said, if there's anything you think we missed the ball on, let us know, and we'll try to correct that. So, but I got a response from my brother, and he says, I liked how immersed I felt in the new world of Pandora. It was truly unlike any other movie I had seen. I like that without watching the first movie in the last 10 years, I could pick up and understand what was going on. Maybe Star Wars could focus more on one family and how one event impacts all the family members in different ways, like Avatar did. And like, I don't think I'd seen Avatar in like 10 years, but I kind of instantly was just back on Pandora with the Sully clan. So that I think was a strength. And it seemed like a lot of people who probably haven't seen Avatar as much, you didn't have to be in the know to understand what was going on. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I hadn't watched the first Avatar in yeah, probably I don't know, 8 years or so, maybe give or take. But yeah, you just kind of pick back up on it, and I guess that's one of the strengths of having a simpler story, is that there's not so much stuff that you have to keep track of going from one tale to the next. And with it being kind of this more isolated story, you're not pulling from other things. That's one of the things that really really kind of grinds my gears, so to speak, with Marvel, is that if you don't watch all of the things, then you're missing parts of the story, and that's definitely not the case here with Avatar. And to the most part, I think within the world of Star Wars, I think that's true now. It's going to run the risk of that not being the case, I think, as we get more and more content and stuff starts to overlap a little bit. But I hope that it's never something to where you need to see one to go into something else. I like things to be, kind of contained. Certainly, there can be some overlap, but I don't think that should be, necessary for getting the full value out of the story.
Yeah. And then I think you have our last patron comment, and then we just have one more comment after that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we got one more from Patreon here from Minhas. So thank you very much for sending this one our way. But in short, in my small opinion, to what I know of Avatar from the first movie, is Star Wars is a much richer and deeper franchise with deep lore, philosophical conflictions, and characters than Avatar. Avatar's story is predictable and linear. It plays on the cliche and magnifies it with visuals and spectacle. Star Wars has not only spectacles and visual, it has meaningful characters, story, and philosophy. Yeah, okay. I guess you could say, yeah, that the first Avatar was kind of simplistic and kind of predictable in that sense. I think that the second Avatar really does a good job of kind of building that world out and kind of changing the expectations and really leaving you questioning. I'm not going to get into like huge spoilers here in terms of Avatar 2, but kind of the way that it ends, you're not 100% sure of what's going to be happening next, which I kind of like. And I think in comparison to something like Star Wars, if you go back to A New Hope, you could watch it and say, yeah, that's pretty linear, pretty predictable on that. So it's really doesn't start getting more of its complications and more of its lore and world building until that world starts to get built up. And I think that that's kind of what we're starting to see now with Avatar 2.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, Avatar kind of has maybe a bit more spirituality in its first movie, and it kind of continues in the second movie. And I think Star Wars, like, with the Force, like, it kind of took like a few more movies to really kind of get the depth that we see in the Force and the Jedi and Sith and everything. But I just hope that the next few iterations of Avatar continue to kind of build its depth, I guess. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So the final comment comes from Coden, who used to be one of the hosts here. So hello, Coden. He says, that's a great question. I like how James Cameron spends time world building, justifying the narrative. I think this is something that the sequel Star Wars movies struggled with. At the same time, evident with this last movie, I think he spent too much time with world building and exposition. I thought the movie could have been shaved down at least 20 minutes. And he goes on to say, also, as much as we love Stephen Lang, LOL, side note, that was his fan cast for Trask Ulgo. And also, I think he ended up saying, like, why can't Stephen Lang be everyone in Star Wars KOTOR? And I'm like, fair enough, because I have some fan casts where Danny DeVito plays every role in KOTOR, and
Yeah.
and also
A
Max
one-man
Rebo.
show. I like it.
So
Max Rebo. Get him in
yeah.
there.
And then continuing with Coden's thoughts, they did something similar with resurrecting the previous villain. Though it was better with Avatar, I thought they could have easily, narratively, had a second landing team with new characters. Before I continue with these thoughts, like, do you think, like, did you kind of like that they resurrected Kortrich, or do you think they could have had new characters?
I personally kind of liked that they brought him back through kind of this cloning procedure, because that felt like something very science fictiony and something like that could plausibly happen if you're having to put people to sleep for years and years and years to get to this far distant away planet. That seems as likely as them just sending a new slew of people to come, and it seemed like they may have kind of pre-planned for that. I think we'll actually get a little bit more of kind of that backstory and what led them to do it. But I guess if you're setting people up to go on a mission, you might have some contingencies for if they die, to be able to bring them back in some sort of capacity or not. So I thought that was good. And then I think again, don't want to get into huge spoilers for the end, but I think that kind of that character's story kind of will progress, and we'll see where that's able to go. So
yeah. And I kind of like the fact that even death can't get them out of their contract with RDA. Like, they'll just
yeah,
bring them back as clones.
You just keep coming back. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then Coden continues, that would also explain how Earth didn't really learn their lesson trying to push out the Na'vi as a new landing team would be tasked with their operation. And I think it's, like, good to kind of, like, have those thoughts, but I think, like, Miles Quartrich, like, having him, like, come across his old body and crush his skull, and, like, having the complication that Spider's his son, it gets me interested to see like what's gonna happen in the future. So
Yeah, for sure. It definitely, kind of gives, in a story that, kind of if people have complaints about it, it's that it's a little thin. Like I find that stuff, really interesting of, what that means if you're just, memories implanted into someone else. Does that mean that you are that person or not? You're just, sharing these memories. And that's kind of one of the things, yeah, that comes about with Spider, his son. There's, in the film as well, what that really means. So yeah, I think that stuff's interesting, and I think that he's a good villain in that sense. And I think that if you're going to be having something span that, you know several films, you need to have kind of an antagonist that's kind of, doggedly pursuing your hero of the story. Be- because if not, then you're having to manufacture sort of a new villain every time. So
yeah, and that was our last comment. I mean, we could continue on for like 2 hours to kind of make it as long as The Way of Water if you want to,
yeah,
but
absolutely,
maybe our listeners
absolutely.
have things they need to do. But yeah, kind of a different Inspired a Galaxy episode. And kind of just like, I realized something is that kind of what got James Cameron into movies in the first place was watching the original Star Wars in 1977. So, I don't know. It's kind of like, I guess, like Star Wars inspired James Cameron, and James Cameron has probably inspired Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned it before that Avatar seems like a movie that George Lucas would really like. I like to imagine that, anyways, and kind of the giveaways and takeaways, and I kind of alluded to it a couple of times, through talking Cassia, but it seems to me like Avatar, obviously it's this kind of big, huge behemoth of a blockbuster, right? The first one made close to $3 billion. The second one's already a little over halfway to that. We'll see kind of what it ends up with, but you have people that really seem to really like it, really be invested in this world, and really enjoy going to see it. And then you have other people that also go to see it, but they kind of take enjoyment in just yeah, finding the negative about this big giant behemoth. And it reminds me a lot of kind of the reaction to a Phantom Menace when that came out. It was this big behemoth of a movie. It was the all-time box office lead there. I think when it overtook Titanic, I believe, if my history is correct on that. But it was something that everyone loved to go and see and really got sucked into. But it was also something that people like to complain about. so I feel like in that sense they're very similar, and comparing Avatar and Star Wars.
Yeah, and I think it's I don't know, better to kind of look introspectively and be curious rather than to be like, this is so stupid, I'm gonna take this down,
Right.
So
Yeah, for
hopefully
sure.
that's what we accomplished here today. So if you agree, disagree with any of the comments, please let us know. What do you think about Avatar? What do you think about Star Wars? Let us know. And is there anything else before we wrap up?
No, just in closing, Avatar 2 was a movie that I liked a lot.
Yeah.
I had a really good time seeing it. You and I were both fortunate enough to be able to see it in IMAX 3D, which is just like an absolute event. There's so much stuff going on the screen at all times. Like, it boggles my mind that people could even like begin to think about how to put something like this together. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really liked it, and yeah, now I'm back on the hook. So I can't wait for the next one.
All right. Instead of saying "May the Force be with you," I will say, "I see you."